What is going on YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. As you may have seen recently, I'm trying my best to give out as much scientific knowledge as possible. Moving away from vlogs, back onto informative videos for you guys. So as you probably guessed, this video is about intermittent fasting. So what is intermittent fasting? The definition of a fast is the purposeful abstaining from food over a long period of time or a duration of time. For example, you may have your last meal at 8 o'clock in the evening, you go to bed, you fast all the way through the morning until about midday the next day. Then you have your first meal and then you eat, and you've got your feeding period of about 8 hours or so. Obviously that can change from person to person. Some people will widen that feeding period and some people will decrease that feeding period, obviously depending on what suits you and your lifestyle and things like that. The first point to make is the whole misconception that you need to have loads of meals throughout the day to keep your metabolism firing is just not true. It's been widely debunked that the thermic effect of food is actually based on the total calories you consume throughout the day rather than the total number of meals that you have throughout that day. So what are some of the benefits of having a smaller feeding period window? For example, less meal prep. For those of you guys or my clients out there who absolutely hate meal prepping, obviously less meals, less meal prep. The snowball effect of food, in the sense that often once you have a meal, if your metabolism is in a good place, you very often feel even hungrier after you finish the meal. And obviously that can lead to a decrease in satiety, and your adherence on the plan starts to decrease. It also means that you can have bigger foods, bigger meals, bigger plates of food that's more likely to kind of satisfy your hunger if you're able to go a specific period of time without food. You can have nicer foods, so obviously you can pick more high calorie dense foods that you might like. The odd pizza, maybe a burger every now and then. Specific foods whose calorie density is normally higher than those that you're already using. Maybe the odd pizza and things like that. If you backload it later on in the evening, you still have some macros left over, or you still have some food left on the plan. Most of all, adherence. And with the last few that I said already, obviously if you're having bigger meals, you're satisfying your hunger a lot better, and you're having some foods that you like, generally you're more likely to adhere to that plan. Generally you're more likely to adhere to that diet. And at the end of the day, it's adherence that counts. So I'm by no means biased either way. So this whole video is giving you the pros and the cons. So I wouldn't be doing it justice without giving you some of the negatives or the downside of intermittent fasting as well. So first and foremost, if your goal is to add as much lean muscle tissue as possible, or just to add tissue in general, then it is probably not ideal. Any of the scientific literature out there states generally you need protein every 4, 5, 6 hours to sustain optimal muscle protein synthesis. Of course, if you're going 16 hours without food, you're going 16 hours without protein, you're going 16 hours without amino acids in your bloodstream, that's probably not going to be optimal. Literature has also shown us that eating at specific times during the day is going to boost our natural growth hormone. Now, although this may be optimal, it's really negligible in the grand scheme of things. The difference that that's going to make to your natural growth hormone is quite minimal in the grand scheme of what you're going to be doing for your nutritional and your training program. So although it is optimal, it's probably not practical. If you're on a bulk, like me when I struggle to put on weight, it's an issue trying to get it in all of this food. So if you're abstaining from food for 16 hours, it's going to be so difficult for you to get all of that food in an 18-hour window. My advice is, if you're on a bulk, if you're trying to grow, intermittent fasting is probably not for you. Also, going back to my last point, if you're on a bulk, you're generally trying to grow muscle tissue. And obviously it's not optimal for muscle protein synthesis or the building of muscle, then it's probably counterproductive. Also, it's probably not optimal if you train in the morning. For example, it is well known that the nutrients or nutrient timing in around the workout perimeter is vital. So if you train in the morning and you're still abstaining from food for a long period of time, It's probably not optimal. Like I said before, if you're talking about muscle protein synthesis or even glycogen replenishment, it's probably not ideal to be going a longer period of time having trained in the morning before you have your first meal. Another point is, if you've got a really demanding job, you burn a lot of calories throughout your day, it is probably not going to be sustainable. You're probably not going to be able to adhere to doing vigorous activity throughout the day and fasting until maybe the afternoon. So you need to take that into consideration as well. What your neat energy levels are, so your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. If you're burning a tremendous amount of calories, it's not going to be easy. So what do I do? It depends. The most important thing, first of all, is to make sure that your first meal when you break your fast is somewhat satisfying and it's a pretty sustainable meal. Generally, high fat, high protein meals are the best for this. Obviously, protein has a satiating effect that it keeps you satisfied for longer, whereas a high glycemic carb meal may give you a massive insulin spike, and you're probably going to be hungrier afterwards than when you started, so that is probably not ideal. So I will have a high protein, high fat meal to break my fast. If I'm intermittent fasting, I will go generally throughout the day on protein fat meals. I generally train in the evening, and obviously that fits in perfectly, first of all, with my lifestyle, but also with intermittent fasting, if that's what I decide to do, so that I can have carbohydrates in and around my workout perimeter, and in particular post-workout. Also, from a psychological standpoint, I feel like if I am good throughout the day, protein fat meal, protein fat meal, protein fat meal, that I train in the evening, I can almost reward myself with carbohydrates post-workout, which is exactly what you want to do in the evening when you sit down with your other half or your family, and you're trying to stay relatively normal on a cut. That's exactly what I kind of, advise my clients to do. If a client comes to me and goes, would you prefer train in the morning or have me train in the evening? I generally think training in the evening is better for that reason, although I'll go into a lot more detail on training in particular another time. The reason I say the evening is because if you're sticking to that sort of food program, it's so much easier to have your carbohydrates in the evening after you train and stay relatively good throughout the day. The last point I will make, and this is a massive point for me, is obviously keeping alert and mentally sharp is something that I need to do on a consistent basis, but is also something that has been massively important for me when I was doing my PhD. I need to stay alert and I need to stay focused and I need my brain to be sharp at all times. From literature, but also from practice, having carbohydrates can often give you almost a sort of brain fog. I find that when I abstain from carbohydrates for a longer period of time in the morning, I'm more sharp, I'm more alert, I'm more awake, I can make better educated decisions, which for me at work, in the lab, in the hospital was so important. So, if you're finding that you're having carbohydrates first thing in the morning, or your second meal of the day, and you're feeling a bit kind of sluggish, and you guys must know that feeling when you have a huge amount of food, a huge amount of carbohydrates, you feel great, you got loads of sugars buzzing around, and then all of a sudden you just slump off. You want to avoid that if your job is mentally draining and you need to stay alert throughout the day. Some caffeine, some protein, some good fats throughout the day keeps me mentally sharp. Then I can relax and wind down in the evening and enjoy my food. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, they're just my thoughts, pros and cons towards intermittent fasting. As always, any videos, any ideas, anything that you want me to cover, please drop them below. I'm going to make a massive conscious effort to get as much material out to you as possible. This is kind of the way my YouTube is going, and I kind of think it's more suited to me, more suited to my brand, more suited to kind of who I am as a coach. So any questions, drop them below. Please like, please subscribe. It makes a massive difference to the growth of my channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one.